we are live and recording. So hello and welcome everybody back to our third episode of the DevOpsSpeakeasy Podcast. I need to mute myself on YouTube. Today, with great pleasure, I want to announce our new guest, Sasha Rosenbaum, a product in GitHub. And
Hi.
With me, my co-host, Kat Cosgrove, developer advocate at JFrog. And I am Baruch, head of DevOps advocacy at JFrog as well. And today we're going to talk about, we'll figure it out. So, Sasha, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Me and Baruch actually share 3 languages. This is interesting, right? Because we speak Russian, Hebrew, and English, obviously. So it's an interesting journey that I've been on. But more on the professional side. So I work for GitHub now. I used to work for Microsoft just about a few weeks ago. So I kind of may say we interchangeably about both of them because that happens. Because GitHub is also now a subsidiary to Microsoft. So that's part of the reason this is happening. And I do work for engineering at GitHub, but it's more on the DevRel type of side than, leading the product definition. I started my career as a developer and I've been in sort of ops also for a couple years. And now I mostly talk to people.
Yeah, that makes 3 of us mostly talk to people. Kat is still insisting writing code, which is good for her.
Look, I love it. And I don't feel like I can, me personally, I don't think this applies to everybody in DevRel. I don't feel like I can accurately and authentically advocate for something if I've never actually used it. And also I do genuinely enjoy writing code.
Yeah, Sorry. No, I think that I meant it more like a joke. Obviously, you should do it. Everybody should do it. We should do it as well, and we try as much as possible. Because
not everybody loves it.
But I also will say, like, there's a different level. Like, I code, obviously, like I write stuff, but there's a different level between like giving a demo on something and like running it in production, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I totally agree that like you have to play with the thing to be able to like speak about it and teach people about it. But also I know that some of my experiences with like writing stuff in production are very different level of engagement, right, than what I do now.
Yeah, I would not want to go back to writing production code. I think I don't, that's a lot of stress. In this position, you can kind of just like YOLO a demo, just like yeet it out into space, and that's way more fun.
I know. I have the rights to push to production, but I just would never do it because I'm afraid of breaking something.
Yeah.
So
So. And you've been with GitHub, like you moved to GitHub not so long ago, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, just like literally a few weeks. I can't even tell how long it's been. So it's a very new thing. And I'm sort of still figuring this out, right, in terms of because if you know, like our product, Azure DevOps, is the product I was working on before. And so we're sort of like merging engineering teams between the two. And so we're figuring out the roadmap. We're figuring out what we're going to do. It's been a very interesting journey.
Yeah, so regarding that, I really wanted to ask, because from what we see from the outside, there is a lot of overlaps what Azure DevOps does and what GitHub does. How that is working out. We'll get to integrations and competition with other products and tools probably soon. But first, I really wanted to ask how your internal competition is handling.
Yeah, so and that's the biggest reason that we're sort of merging the teams and starting to work all together, because like we did not want to create that internal competition, and that just didn't seem like, you know, the right decision. I will say, like, every time I speak about it publicly, I still like, and we've been talking about it for 6 months, and I'm still like feeling like, oh my God, I'm gonna say something that's just like gonna, you know, go terribly wrong. But you know, in the space of being politically correct, we are like, GitHub is the future, right? That this is what's going to happen 100%. But like, we're still supporting Azure DevOps. More than that, we're still investing in Azure DevOps, because GitHub is not going to immediately work for everybody, right? We have things that like our features in Azure DevOps that GitHub is pretty far from implementing. So for a few years, there's going to be 2 products for sure. But if you want to do like get new and cool stuff, you definitely want to go on the GitHub side.
I mean, the GitHub side also seems more geared towards using cool new technologies in like personal projects and in free open source projects that are maybe like a little bit more, they have no money and it's just some people that are passionate about making this thing work. It seems like GitHub aims for that demographic more than like Azure DevOps would.
So it's an interesting thing where like your customers drive you. So at Microsoft, very much like the enterprise customers drove their requirements for that, for Azure DevOps, whereas in GitHub, we kind of have both. So I would agree with you that there's, you know, the huge open source community on GitHub, but there's also lots of enterprise features, which people are maybe like less familiar with. But you can definitely see like some of the things that we're missing compared to Azure DevOps is the enterprise stuff, right? And like, you know, things like data sovereignty and stuff like that, that just, we didn't, like GitHub didn't have to deal with that before. So yeah, it's like an interesting thing. But so the exciting part about it is that at GitHub, we now have like the ability to address some of the things that we never would have been able to do in Azure DevOps. So like, as a, for instance, like the fact that we have the largely like open sources, like projects that are based on GitHub, gives us a wealth of data in terms of implementing security features that we would never be able to do in Azure DevOps.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't think of it from a farming it for security concerns perspective. That's neat. I do think it was an interesting acquisition for Microsoft. Maybe gave them a little bit of a much needed cool factor, kind of.
Hope so.
Yeah. Which feels weird to say, but you know, when I was growing up, Microsoft was very much not cool. They were very stiff, and they're making like an active effort to change that and be more human, I guess.
It's a very interesting journey, because like obviously I wasn't in Microsoft, you know, for like, I was in Microsoft for 4 years before I joined GitHub, but I was in Microsoft ecosystem for about 5 years before that. So like I was in sort of that pool of people and technologies. But it's an interesting journey that Microsoft went on, from like open source is the cancer, you know, and we will shut down Linux in the world and stuff like that, to where like we sell Linux to people. Yeah. It's kind of
embrace
insane.
It.
And we're like one of the largest contributors to open source. And there's so much. So actually part of the reason that Microsoft acquired GitHub is that we actually wanted to like contribute to the world, like because GitHub was, you know, needed some financial backing, you know, that they probably wouldn't be able to have without an acquisition. And so that was part of it. Like, and also like Microsoft Docs is the, like, I think the largest or one of the largest open source repositories on GitHub. It's kind of an interesting thing, right? So yeah, because we open source the docs. So now like if you see something wrong in the docs, you can go submit a PR on it, and like contribute to Microsoft Docs. And obviously most of the contributions are from Microsoft people, but we do have definitely community contributions there. And so it just was like a slow mind shift to where we realized that open source was a thing, and that we had to be part of it to be successful.
It's been like a whole societal switch too, because like my dad is an engineer. He's 65 or so, and he thought open source was like absolutely, he even like extending as far as Pandora free radio. It's just like evil until like, I don't know, 2009, 2010, and he decided that it's just the coolest fucking thing in the world.
So the
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
The thing about this is like, so a lot of people have security concerns when going with open source, and like it is actually justified, which is why I'm saying like GitHub is now looking into ways to secure your code, but the like secure your code, secure your assemblies that come into your projects and stuff like that. Because there's definitely an issue, right? People have been pushing like malicious stuff into public repos and stuff like that.
Yeah, it happened a couple of times with npm, pretty famously.
Right, and it's sometimes it's really, really hard to catch because open source maintainers only have so much time, and like someone's doing like, you know, contribute a backdoor and whatever, and like even a little bit of contribution can take out. Like there was can't remember what it was, but one of the npm assemblies that took out like half the internet, and it was like a tiny dependency that people had, right? But it like literally like that going away took out half the internet, right? And imagine if npm went out. So like, where was it going with this? I don't know. Oh yeah, like in terms of like the security stuff, the big mind shift that happened is like, if you look at the numbers, and we're actually like, it's in our like roadmap decks, like 99% of software now depends on open source, right?
Yep.
And 90% of your code, that's insane. Like 90% of your code is actually not coming from you. So you only write 10% of your code, and everything else is coming from npm, NuGet, whatever it is, right? And so once you see that, like you just have to adapt to it in different ways. Instead of saying like, I'm not going to take this code, you have to say like, how do I take this code securely?
You mentioned npm. Obviously, we'll get back to the news of npm acquisition, because I think that's very, very interesting and very, very hot potato you voluntarily got into your hands. We'll get to it in a second, but still on the positioning of your offerings between Azure DevOps and GitHub, I find it a little bit surprising what you said, that everything goes GitHub. It's not that I think it's a bad idea. I'm just surprised because Azure as a cloud solution is obviously very, very strong contender to the market leader to AWS, and if I remember correctly, it grows faster than any other cloud provider. And I think that Microsoft does great things with Azure. We are, as JFrog, very active on Azure, both as the SaaS that we suggest and provide, but also in the marketplace. So we see how Microsoft does things with Azure, and I think that there are very, very good good things happen here. So I'm kind of surprised that you take a very, very important part of the cloud offering, which is the artifacts management and the CI and the security, and kind of take it away from this Azure branding, or if you wish, like a marketing umbrella, and take it into GitHub. I understand the cool factor of GitHub, but I think that Azure tries to be that cool thing, and it's kind of sounds a little bit surprising to me.
So what is surprising about this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because if we had two CI/CD products, like then essentially we have to support sort of internal competition, right? Which is usually not the best idea. But so what part of it, like we're still gonna support Azure with GitHub, you know, in the long run, because I also have to caveat with like, and I have to obviously put numbers to it. It's like, there's at least 5 years of Azure DevOps being around, right? So like, because when I don't put numbers to it, people think it's much less, but like we are, talking about supporting the product for a long time, right? But we are investing in GitHub as a main sort of direction.
Yeah, no, I get that, and obviously internal competition is definitely not the way to go. What I thought if I had to like put all those offerings in one or the other, I would actually say Azure, because it's the entire cloud ecosystem. It's like where you run your code, but also when you build this code, when you manage the artifacts, when you build the pipeline and everything. A little bit like JFrog, right? So we have this entire solution, everything from source code all the way to the runtime to Kubernetes, if you like, or Kubernetes on Azure if you like it even more. But still, it's like it's all one JFrog. It's all one platform, and so it's not that I'm complaining or anything. It's just I feel
You
a
expect a
little bit.
first party solution.
I feel bad for Azure because their cool stuff is going on there, and I want Azure DevOps to be very attractive and very powerful. And
Yeah.
you kind of take it a little bit from Azure that I personally kind of feel for.
So there's a big interesting thing here, which like you kind of got onto, which is we have to make decisions differently in GitHub than we do in Azure DevOps, because so Azure DevOps was always an extensible platform, right? And you can always push to AWS and whatever, like from Azure DevOps, but most people, let's admit that, weren't using it for that, right? Whereas if we implement CI/CD in GitHub, we have to support like all three major clouds and whatnot else, is out there, right?
Sure.
So we have to, and we can't even, how do I say that? Like if you look at GitHub Universe from I don't know, whatever, 4 months ago, whenever it was, and we had an AWS demo CI/CD on stage, not Azure. And then there's a reason that we do that, right? Because we can't put Azure on stage, because then it's like, oh, it's a first party, Microsoft solution with GitHub, and you can't so we have to make sure that we remain neutral in that sense. And that means that like we're no longer like a first party, only supporting our own cloud and stuff like that. But it was something that,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I hear that. Yeah. Like when the acquisition was first announced, at least a bunch of my friends were like super, super concerned that moving forward, GitHub would only allow integrations with other Microsoft products. And it would be like Azure integrations only. And I think if you came out the gate marketing only stuff with Azure, even if it still worked with AWS and Google Cloud, people would riot, I think.
Yeah. But so I think this came out, and like I don't know, how much of that we want to say publicly, but I think this came out of.
Oh, it's only
like,
three of us here.
No.
It's a new podcast. No one listens. That's okay.
No. So again, like this is like PR things, and this is like, to me, is a little bit conflicting. But I think this came from like Sasha and the leadership team at one point where they were like, we can, as Microsoft, we can just have like developer solutions. Like we don't have to push everything into Azure Cloud. Like we can, like VS Code is obviously like free for everyone, and like, folks are using it to build whatever. And it's like, I think now most popular editor, I don't know, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but it like we can just do this sort of contribution for everyone, and we can like, we have the money to invest in the community, right? And why not, right? It's like doing the right thing for everybody. And obviously there's an upside in this for Microsoft, like you said, the cool factor, right? We did not have that. And for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, maybe Microsoft was considered this old, enterprise facing machine, right? So.
Seems less old enterprise facing machine these days, though.
It's very interesting to me, because I always thought that like CEOs are overrated, and I thought that before, like until like Sach took over Microsoft, and like you can see 100% that one person can change direction on like a freaking huge company.
Yeah, I think that's proven by now that he did the right thing on so many levels, and it changed so much. Yep.
Our CEO is super cool, so.
Yeah, and I hope we won't see changes. We like our direction now, so
yeah,
that's fine.
He can stay. He can stay.
I've never met your CEO, so I don't know. But
Well, Swamp Up will happen in some form or shape in this time or another, and then obviously we will make sure to introduce you.
It's funny because I will say, like, I met Sasha, like I shook Sasha's hand once, and it was completely by accident. And it was funny because like people are asking me like what was your elevator pitch? And I'm like, nice to meet you. That's not like how much time you get. So yeah.
They're still people. They're not gods, you know. So I don't
But
know.
like he was at a conference, and so like obviously he has like a security detail and whatever because like, you have to, and so like yeah, like in the space of 10 seconds, like, that's what you can say.
Yeah, now ours is still a little bit more approachable, but we grow fast. Go figure what will happen.
When I first joined Microsoft, I was like, I'm gonna meet him like in person and have a dinner with him and whatever. So far, didn't happen. So I don't know. Maybe he'll listen to this podcast and then like it will.
Oh, absolutely,
They'll hit you up.
absolutely. When I mentioned we have no listeners, is only Sasha. He's the only one. There's no one else.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know what? I really love what you mentioned about GitHub being less Azure and less Microsoft for that means, and more integrations, more open and everything, because I think we have, as JFrog and GitHub, have a good history of good shared story and integrations and people working with both of them together. And I think we can brainstorm after the podcast how we can tell the stories about those integrations more, because, and we obviously have some conflicting and I would say we competing solutions, both the packages and the actions. But I think in the end of the day, if we can show people how can they benefit from the best composition of those services, it's going to be beneficial for all of us. I think that's more or less what we plan for Swamp Up as well. Showing some pieces of GitHub with some pieces of JFrog working together, and eventually running in Azure or any other cloud.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways GitHub is like very well positioned for integrations, but in some ways we actually had more extensibility in Azure DevOps than we do in GitHub. It's a very interesting thing because we allowed people to build custom extensions and share them in whatever level of sharing they wanted and stuff. And some of this is kind of impossible with GitHub. So we're looking into like making it more accessible. But on the other hand, like if you look at actions, like anybody can build an action, and like that is completely open source as opposed to like us building all of this stuff. So
yeah, and actions are I think pretty cool in the way that they are very easy to start with. And I think so. We have CI/CD for what, for 10 years, more than 10 years, right? Back in the late 20 years back in the late 90s. And
I don't know about 20 years. So we just I did the delivery conf in Seattle in January, and that was the 10 years of the continuous delivery book. So it was the first time anybody coined the term. I'm
talking about continuous integration. I'm talking about the build server, right? And the build servers are with us for more than 20 years. And by now you would expect everybody to have a CI in some level at least. And all three of us know that that's not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, not everyone has source control. So sometimes when people talk about how
it's terrifying.
Well, it's really interesting to me because sometimes people from large companies forget that the world looks different out there, and they're like, oh, this is table stakes. No, it's not. There's a lot of people out there who are doing planning in Excel spreadsheets and no source control and copying things to production stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my point, and I think that while not having source control is really, I think, the exception by now, thanks to GitHub among other things that made it very very approachable. The CI part was more of a challenge, although a small one, but still for a lot of people. Like, oh, I need to spin up Jenkins now, and that was like, I don't want to do it. So and what I hope GitHub Action will become for CI is what GitHub became for source control. Something no-brainer, non-trivial. You have your source in GitHub. It's built on GitHub Actions.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope this is what's going to happen. We actually see a crazy, like, so this is a new product, obviously, and we see a crazy ramp up in terms of the usage.
Yeah, no, I guess everybody are interested in trying it at least, right? I think we are not exception. You tried GitHub Actions.
Yeah, it's easier to use now
GitHub
than
Actions. Everybody tried GitHub Actions. Yeah.
Like V1 was kind of rough. I tried Actions V1 and like it was usable, but it wasn't easier than like what I already used in like my dumb home projects. But V2 and using just using YAML instead.
Yeah.
Way easier.
And it's like we're so there's a couple of things that top of mind for people, and we're kind of working through fixing them. But like once we get to a certain level, I think it's going to be very very accessible for folks.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, right? But in terms of actions, we can talk about like more complicated features of pipelines and using the metadata from your artifacts and all that, and there are good solutions for that. Obviously, JFrog pipelines is one of them. But for getting started, for having your code built like right now for a super fast feedback where the source code is, I think this is just great, and this is where I personally wish GitHub Actions all the luck and actually being a natural extension to the source control.
Especially CI, right? CI should be relatively easy as compared to like CD. Like, and even like I am honestly like you can be particular about continuous deployment, continuous delivery, whatever. Like I think some type of release control is a really good thing to have. And even if like in my opinion, like even if you have like a basic pipeline and you have to still like approve manually and like push through the steps and whatever, it's still going to save you a lot of time and trouble of like doing manual checklists and things like that. But again, wherever you are in that journey, and CI should like really become really accessible to everyone, like running tests and running the builds, making sure that it works,
Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page here. Absolutely. Time to talk about the elephant in the room, like really, really fat and dirty elephant in the room.
Okay.
So why would anyone in their clear mind want to take over this steaming pile that is called the npm registry?
Well, this is me, Sasha, speaking, and not, GitHub speaking, I have to say. But honestly, I think the biggest reason we did it is because they needed money. Like, I think, and it sort of, in my mind, sort of resembles like why Microsoft acquired GitHub also, but npm was in much bigger financial trouble, I think. And realistically, like their private offerings were just nowhere near like being able to support them, and so like living off donations or whatever like was also not, like they are running the internet, right? And this is a free project that's running the internet. You need to have some type of financial backing where like you have other products like that, like get the in-stream of money to be able to support that.
That's fair.
Okay, I get it. I mean, that's noble, and I think we have huge respect for companies that do that. My question is, you didn't back them up and gave them money. You actually took over. So the question is, now what? Now you have this, you have it, and people are, I don't know if there is another repository that people kind of dislike more than GitHub than npm.js in terms of like everything starting from left pad and all the way. It's just, you know, it's a lot to digest in terms of an organization, and
I don't hate npm. It's just you know, it's got problems, but it's lovable in its
is
quirks.
it?
I mean,
Yeah.
so essential though. Like imagine, like we were just talking about this, right? That like one little package going away from npm took down like so many websites. Imagine npm going away, right? Like your websites, every single one of them depends on npm being up and running like at every single second, right? And so in supporting that scale is insane. So they may have problems, but I mean, they're doing a free service for everyone, and it was part of their ideology that it will always be free and all things like that, right? So, and I don't want to like I obviously don't want to say like this is like charity or something like that, but just like I honestly think that was probably the biggest driver. But obviously we to be competition and stuff like we have a packages product now, and so that will definitely be part of it. And I don't know exactly what the roadmap is going to look like, but it's going to also allow us to, again, the security features we're talking about, like it's going to allow us to secure the sources a little bit more for the npm and stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of benefits potentially that we can have out of owning the repository.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of benefits as well. Yeah, but also a lot of work on cleaning it up. And again, we as JFrog, we've been through all that, obviously with Bintray and JCenter, and I think that I'm the first person to admit that this is extremely hard to get right. After what it was like 6 years of managing artifacts and hoping that we understand how the things worked, we got into this market wish of public repositories and registries and discovered a completely new set of challenges, which mostly are in the area of how do you control availability versus not becoming just a dump of every hello world test project in the world. And also obviously the point about security, ownership, how are you still approachable and people can submit and control their packages versus how you prevent man in middle attack on the supply chain. So it's there are different approaches. There is Maven Central as one of the examples. There is npm.js as almost the opposite. There is JCenter that we and other GoCenter and that we try to kind of find a middle way. It's definitely not an easy domain. And if someone thinks that all we need in order to maintain npm registry is a bunch of computers with storage and bandwidth, this is definitely not the situation. So again, my best wishes of luck for GitHub in trying to figure that out and deciding what is the right path to go. Because as I mentioned, as it works now, obviously there are some advantages. It's very accessible, but it also comes with the price that needs to be evaluated.
So it's interesting. Like I actually don't know, your part of the story. So I would like if there's blogs on this, like how you discovered all the problems. That would be super interesting for me to look at. But I think so. The problems that you mentioned, I think it's a problem with every platform, right? Whenever you run a platform, you always have to worry about like how accessible it is versus how like security or whatever other issues you might have with people pushing like stray stuff into your platform, right? Work in Microsoft is really good at running platforms. GitHub is also a platform, but again, like slightly in a different space. But still, I think between our engineering resources, I think we can do this, but I won't pretend that like it's going to be an easy journey, right? And also, it's an interesting one because there's like, I feel like more chances of going wrong than going right. You know what I mean? Like people don't sort of remember that, you know, we're doing something good for the community. Like that don't always, right? There's much more chances for like negative publicity around some of these things.
Oh, for sure, for sure, for sure. This is again something that we can relate to. The ratio of praises versus hate is definitely not for the praises, even if we try to do the right thing and we think we're doing the right thing. Regarding your question, I will post some entries to blog posts and what's not in the show notes, both on Podbean and on YouTube after we are done, so you'll be able to go and check it out. It's basically an interesting story about, and if you wish, I mean, it's a podcast, we have time, so I can go into details a little bit here. So
I'm like, if you want to go into it, like that's interesting to me because like,
yeah, no, absolutely. I hope
loves going on a tirade. So
yeah, and I hope it's interesting not only to you, but as I mentioned, no one else is here, so why not? So basically, yeah, as we spoke, when we are creating a public registry, you obviously want as many artifacts there as possible, because this is how people benefit from third-party dependencies. You mentioned 90% of the code are those dependencies, so that makes sense to make it as much accessible as possible. But on the other way, if all you need to do to push to npm registry is register there, and then next thing you know, you start uploading packages, you can just, for the fun of it, do a search for the keyword like for hello world in npm registry, and you will obviously find tons of packages that people actually submit their hello world as packages to npm registry, which is obviously junk because it's not a usable dependency for anyone else. So this is kind of one extreme, and it's like the bazaar, if you wish. There is like open approach, everybody can put whatever they like there, and obviously it makes it kind of messy. The other extreme, I would say, is something what Sonatype does with Maven Central, and this is like a strict gateway or strict policy of getting in, and it means that you obviously have requirements of what good package looks like. You have to have this and this and that. You have to sign your artifacts with a key, and then you submit a Jira request, and they review if this package is, if you wish, worthy of Maven Central. And it wasn't like a negative. It actually means that they check
like
if it's
Google Play versus Apple App Store, right? I mean,
yeah,
like,
a little bit. Although Google Play also checks a lot, but obviously it's easier, right? And this obviously is a big obstacle for people getting on board. And also because of this manual process, it's available later, and there is all those downsides. And we really looked at those two few extremes when we try to come up with a good solution for our central repository back then, the JCenter, and we thought, what can be a good combination between the two that will promise accessibility from one side, but also will somehow, to some extent, guarantee some kind of quality on the other side, on the output. And what we came up with was a combination of a private space, if you wish, that you can, it's also publicly available, but it's your space, in which you can just do whatever you like. Your hello world is welcome there, but then kind of a graduation to a certified central repository that we are on the gate of it. And if you want of all that you have in your on your private space, you want something to be accessible by anybody and in one centralized URL of the JCenter, then we will take a look at it and we will do our best to verify your identity. And that will be, as of today, just relying on your public identity. So we will know that.
And is that something like a human is processing that acceptance?
So it's a combination of automatic verification and human process. Automatic verification to whatever we can do. So for example, if you are logged in to Bintray with your GitHub account, then we are pretty sure that the sources that you are trying to publish, sorry, the artifact that you are trying to publish with your GitHub URL as the package name are actually yours. But if you are logged in with your private Gmail and you try to publish artifacts with com.microsoft as your package, we will come to you and we will ask you to prove that you have the permissions to actually do that. Right. And then we will establish some kind of, you will prove us that you are actually in charge of publishing packages for com.microsoft or whatever makes sense.
So it's an interesting thing because I think it also like depends on the size of your platform, because at certain scales, like some things become easier and some things become harder, right? So like having human verification at the size of npm is impossible. But then on the other hand, like I think there's less of a chance of like people like, not like, because when you just starting out, people will just like, if the platform is not accessible, people will stop pushing to it. Whereas like at a large size, you probably don't have that problem. Although there's always like the chance of a mass exodus from your platform, which is probably the worst thing that, you can possibly have. So definitely not an easy problem to solve.
I mean, NPM is doing a lot with a little, I think. So it's commendable. There are problems with it, but I think it's commendable what they've done with no real money and not a lot of resources.
Yeah. Also, like I have to say, like the acquisition still hasn't gone through. Like obviously, it also has to first happen. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we are not concerned with facts in this podcast. I mean, speculations are good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's been announced. As long as everything works out fine, like obviously we'll go through, but it hasn't legally finished. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we can think about a couple of more central repositories / registries with problems. So we'll see if you are continuing with this thread of buying everything that needs money. That would be interesting. Without naming any names, I think you can guess who I'm looking at. Not elephant, another animal still.
I'm not privy to all of these decisions, so I don't know.
Yep. No, I think you're personally making those decisions. I'm pretty sure.
Sometimes they actually ask me for my opinion. I don't know.
But... Oh, here you go. You see, told you. Anything else we wanted to talk about before we're switching gears to talk about the stuff that probably not interesting for most of our 5 listeners, and it will be DevRel during siege.
Kat, go ahead.
Oh no, just the social isolation. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wonder if we didn't cover anything else before we go into that, because that will be
I think we're good.
Interesting topic for 3 of us for sure. I'm not sure for anyone else.
I actually think like this is interesting for a lot of folks, and like we don't have to like talk about DevRel specifically, right? But just kind of how do you survive in this situation and what's happening, and
let's do that.
On the subject of DevRel in this, obviously most of us, our job is to talk to people. It's like to be like the public face of a company or a product or an idea or a movement or whatever. And we're all now producing a ton of digital content, usually like recordings or podcasts like this, to make up for the fact that we can't go to conferences anymore. Our hairstylists and barbers and nail techs and our eyebrow ladies are all closed, and we're all going to start looking real rough in like a month. Baruch's okay because he just shaves his head.
I thought about it actually last night. My barber that does the beard is probably closed, and I'm like, okay, that will get ugly very, very soon.
Yeah, like I shave my head myself, and I have I dye my own hair. I have enough bleach to do my roots one more time. So if this isn't over in like 3 months, I'm gonna start looking pretty haggard.
I think, let this be the worst of our problems, honestly, because
Yeah,
like I am right now thinking about like how privileged we really are to be
we
where we
are.
are. And
Oh, for sure. For
despite
sure.
despite the whole thing with like, yes, our job is to talk to people, but apparently we can still talk to people when this is, shutting down. And some people can't. There's a lot of infrastructure and folks who support events who don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
And just to mention like small businesses and like people who work in services for some of these things that have been shut down. Like if my hair can't get colored, then I'm just gonna have gray
I
hair,
mean,
whatever.
it's also my husband's business. So like my husband runs his own fencing club here in Seattle, and it shut his club down. So
it
I
was
get
interesting.
it. It sucks.
So we at Microsoft we have this like money that goes towards your like stay fit, right? And so it was interesting because like I spent it on renewing my gym membership, and I'm like I should have bought a treadmill. Because
Yeah,
my
no, but it's all
membership
you're 100% right. We're complaining about completely, petty stuff. People, millions of people are going, I don't know if hundreds of millions or tens of millions of people are going to find themselves out of job very, very soon. And our problems are definitely not something worth even mentioning in this regard. Uh,
Well, I will say like we're not immune to this. Like as much as like so if I think about like Microsoft and GitHub, like yeah, we're probably not going to be impacted by this crisis in an immediate fashion, but the ripple effect is going to get us, right? Because like Marriott's been like that's my example this week. Like Marriott's been shutting everything down and they don't have money, and that means that they don't have money probably to pay their bills, and so we're not going to get any money from them, and that's just a tiny piece, right? But like so many people are going to go bankrupt now. It's going to get us eventually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I understand that we all work computers remote and everything, but if eventually we do stuff for other companies and those companies are not making any money because they got bankrupt or just cut so to like the minimum operational expenses, then obviously we our companies are going to suffer, and eventually we are uh, shrinking 40% of the economy won't won't leave anyone immune. That's for sure. But okay, that was really, really gloom.
Okay,
um
I will do something. I'm still like getting Microsoft email. My Microsoft email still works, which has been a blessing and a curse. But anyway, because I get now emails from two business emails. But anyway, like I've been like the Microsoft response has just been phenomenal because like we're still paying vendors for all of the stuff, and now they're shipping. So the cafeteria is obviously shut down, but now instead of doing the cafeterias, they're shipping that food to local kids in need and stuff like
Oh,
that. Like it's just like kind of
great.
makes me proud of this company, like and the level of like community service that like Microsoft is trying to do is just I don't know, makes me sentimental.
yeah, I mean, for a good reason. This is we all hear about Microsoft that's in the community, and you really have all the reasons to be proud. um let's get from the gloomy micro level to our PT complaints. Sorry, yeah, micro level to our PT complaints. Micro level. What is going on with us? How are we manage? Some tips for folks maybe working from home in DevRel or not in DevRel.
So I think it was sad to me how many people publish their how to work from home type of content. And so like at one point someone on my team said like, should we publish this? And I go, maybe not because it's just getting
Everybody and their mother has written how to
yeah.
work from home guide,
It,
and they're
it
all different.
yes. And it's really interesting because I've been working so at Microsoft I was working from home for like a couple of years. It was primarily working from home, right? And then like a couple of years it was like half traveling and half working from home. And so it's interesting because I've gleaned some things from these blogs that I haven't been doing before. So I'm like, okay, that's teaching an old
So
dog.
it was useful. You see, So maybe we should talk about it more.
We should. I don't know. But yeah, it's so we have switched over to doing virtual content, obviously, and it's actually interesting to me how fast we did it. So we ran the Microsoft MVP Summit last week. So basically, on a 2-week notice, we went from an actual conference into a virtual conference. It's just like mind blowing how we can make the infrastructure work. And it's been an interesting experience, but I'm thinking like it wasn't like representative of what's to come, because like everybody hates webinars, right? And so there's a different, it's interesting because I've been thinking about this. There's a big difference between a webinar and like a customer call, right? Because like when you, and the biggest difference there is that on a customer call, you get an interaction, right? You actually get to talk to people and they ask you questions, and it doesn't matter that it's virtual because you're still getting feedback. But webinars, you're sort of talking to a wall, right? And you get nothing, and you don't know, there may be 30,000 people there, or there may be 2, and maybe those are multitasking and not listening to you. So I don't know what the solution quite is, because what I think personally is that you couldn't really get this level of interaction unless you really know who your audience is. Right? Because the reason that conference sessions are not interactive is not just that there's 300 people in the audience, but also that if I were to take questions, this could lead me completely off track for what I'm actually talking about, right?
Which is fine for a customer call, but not really for a conference.
Right.
Well, in the customer call, you know who you're talking to, right? So you know it's developers, or it's ops people, or it's administrative people, or it's like, I don't know, Salesforce, whatever, right? So you know like who you're talking to, and you know where you want to take this. Whereas like in a conference, like let's say I'm talking about like, I don't know, CI/CD for ML, and people can ask me questions about ML, about CI/CD, what is DevOps, like, you know, stuff like that. That's like, okay, this was not where I was going with this, right? So I don't know. Do you all have any ideas on how to make webinars suck less, I guess?
Yeah, you know, I'll get back to you on that. I'm trying to do like a virtual meetup on April 9th. And the plan is that it's going to be, because it's a virtual meetup, we're shooting for something very casual. And basically the way we're planning on handling it now is we have a panel of like 3 or 4 speakers with 1 moderator, me, and they'll be the only ones able to actually speak on stream. But I guess I will be like actively monitoring the QA box or the chat box on Zoom. And if something comes up that people think is interesting, we spin up a breakout room, move the discussion over there for that particular thing. I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants and just see what the crowd likes. And I'll let you know how that goes.
So I will jump in. So there's a virtual conference this Friday. It's called DevOps, and it's like, you know, a technical female speakers. That, yes, you're the reason I'm speaking there. Actually, I forgot about that. So yeah, Baruch made an intro between me and Sveta. So anyhow, but so what they're doing differently is actually they're pre-recording the sessions, and then they have speakers like answer questions during Q&A. So I'm really curious about, like, this sounds like such a great idea, because like as a speaker you usually can't like really pay attention to the chat. So maybe there's like 2 of me, like it's like cloning myself essentially, right? So I like, if anyone wants to come to that conference, again, it's devops.org. And the tickets are super cheap and accessible. So, you know, if you have time on Friday, you can show up and listen to some sessions. I want to see how it goes. I think, you know, the virtual conference I had last week, like the interesting part was like, we had an audience that's actively engaged, right? They really care about this content. They really care about this roadmap. They really care about like talking to us about the future. And so like no one like is signing off or multitasking, right? Whereas at a normal event, you know, you could get like that effect of people dropping off because they just got a Slack message or an email and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's that's why we're trying to have a moderator plus the panelists for the thing I'm doing, because it's, yeah, like it's really hard for the speaker to interact during a webinar type thing. It's just, I want these virtual events to not feel like webinars, you know? because a webinar is one person, maybe a couple of people just talking at a crowd with no engagement, and it's awkward. Webinars kind of just suck. So I'm interested to talk to anybody who's organized a virtual conference and see what they did, how they handled it.
I'm happy to talk, after this, just
Yeah.
to stay a couple minutes, share notes.
And I'm thinking about what you said about being pre-recording and then being present when watching. And I agree with you that I think that might be the solution for
Right.
all this. I'm talking to nobody and I hear nothing back, because one of the more fun things that we've been doing since when we had in-person conferences like last year or something, like last decade or something, whenever it were in the previous era, is actually watching your talk later with other folks and commenting on it and kind of answering questions.
Never actually tried that. Like watching my talks is torture, and then watching with other folks is something I've never tried.
And it makes it fun because people give you shit in real time and you reply, and it's nice. I like it. And what you're saying is that this might be actually the engaging format, right? Your talk is playing in the background, but you can actually speak with people, although online, but still about what you said, clarifications, asking questions in real time, and then providing more context on some points. And that might be actually a very, very nice solution to this lack of interaction. And as you mentioned, it's kind of your duplicate yourself. There is you giving the talk, but there is also you discussing what you said in real time. And I think that might be very, very interesting.
There's another benefit to this, and this is like not everybody has good equipment at home, right? Like we have this, and I've literally acquired a ton of stuff just this week, like last week, just because I know there's going to be a lot more streaming, right? So, but like I can expense it, B, this is part of my job, right? But for regular speakers, like they could have bad internet connection, they could have no good audio equipment and stuff like that. And when you get these talks pre-recorded, then that it's not gonna suck like completely, in terms of like, oh, can you see my video? Can you hear me? Is my internet dropping and stuff?
So this is all been fixed by this model, because it's pre-recorded, so there is no issue with people stop hearing you or seeing you. And it's also you are there with them watching as one of those, so you also know how it comes across. And you know what, I think that might be a very, very nice solution for a lot of the problems of virtual conferences. I still hate them. I still can't wait for like in-person conferences are back, but for now I think that might be a very nice solution for a lot of the problems.
So Aaron made this point on Twitter, and I really liked it. It's like, no one's intentionally going to virtual concerts, right? It's like there's a difference between a live event and a like virtual event, and we can get really, really good at virtual events. We will have to, but it's still not going to replace, the in-person type of interaction that you can get.
All right.
But come to that conference. I'm definitely going there partially just to watch and learn.
Yeah, I think the lineup is amazing. So Sasha will be there, Kat will be there, tons of other very good speakers on very good topics. There will be a fun panel during lunch about salary negotiation. So you should join this as well. And yeah, it's this Friday, and definitely you should all come and participate.
It's gonna be good.
Mm-hmm. What else? What else on our little DevRel world during those siege times? What else is interesting? Or
well, I don't know if it's interesting to a lot of people, but so DevOps Chicago is on my mind because it's scheduled for 1st and 2nd of September, and we're still
which one?
DevOps Chicago. So
DevOps Chicago. Yeah.
Part of the organizing team, and we still haven't made a decision what to do. Like part of us is like, we're hoping that like we will be able to restart in-person events. Personally, I think we probably won't be able to. But you know, it's an interesting one because going virtual is such a huge decision. Like canceling is relatively easy, although there's financial implications to that. But going virtual is non-trivial at all. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, the infrastructure involved in going totally virtual for like a really, really large event has to be an enormous pain. I know that Blizzard has had to jump through a ton of hopes to move Overwatch League to streaming content instead of in-person events with the players playing on LAN, and it's been a lot of infrastructure to support that. I don't envy anybody who has to actually manage that transition.
I also think that it's not only a matter of infrastructure.
Right?
So sorry, Sasha, go ahead.
Sorry, like you all doing the swamp up, so it has to be on your mind as well. And yours.
Oh yeah, and it's June, so it's a tough question. And I think that the question is not only like the infrastructure, the cost of infrastructure, but the real platform of how you do it, because conference is not a webinar, it's not a meeting, it's not anything of those formats that we have tools to run. I mean, conference is something completely different. There are many tracks. People are supposed to be able to switch, and this is all the interaction part. And there is ask the speaker, and there is a registration and paid access. And there are so many questions that maybe it's just me because I always hated virtual events, so I never took any interest in investigating the platforms that exist. Maybe it's all been exist, but I never encountered yet a good platform for running a virtual conference.
So we did, it's interesting because we did the MVP summit, we did it in Teams. And the biggest thing that was really hard, it was the authentication part, because it's not internal only, right? It's external, but it's NDA. So you really can't have people join like it's not even like they can buy a ticket and join. Like we had to verify everybody's identity. So that was the biggest thing to figure out. And so I think the Teams team did an amazing job like pulling it off in 2 weeks notice, but like obviously it wasn't perfect, but somehow at least like my track that I know of, like everything worked. Except for like the recordings were not perfect, but like the conference itself, like it worked out. But we did have to like limit attendees to like 250 people per session, because like that's as much as we could do with authentication. Because like obviously we can do a webinar for as many people as you want, but we had a limit for, active interactive participation in there.
250 is not bad for a session though. I know Baruch's spoken in front of larger crowds, but I don't think I have. So
wait for it. DevOps is going to happen in this way or another. You both will be there, I hope. And it's a good conference to be in. So
I'm signed up to speak at the DevOps St. Petersburg, which is like
October
farther apart, which is funny now because like now I think I could have done either, but like obviously if they go virtual. But it's interesting. DevOps Chicago usually is we've done 550 people, so it's not huge, but it's not tiny.
And it's on track. So this is
how we get more than
250 people in one room. Yep.
So we usually, the thing is like, we don't like in Chicago, like we don't necessarily care about like people having access to it. So like, we don't have to verify your identity as long as you paid for a ticket, and we can obviously make the tickets cheaper as long as it pays for the infrastructure and stuff like that. Cause like the whole conference is nonprofit. So we don't have to worry about like, we only need to pay costs basically, but it's like really non-trivial to pull this off, honestly.
Yeah, and but still, I think about the platform in terms of, for example, doing the thing of pre-recording, then playing and discussing it together and all this kind of stuff, which brings me back to this Friday and to DevOps. The company behind this this event, they call Tulula, and in the previous era they did kind of, if you remember Lanyard back in the day, like a directory of all the possible conferences in the world. So they started with an alternative to Lanyard, which is now dead, and you can still have, obviously, kind of newsletters with the conferences that you care about, either speaking or attending, and you can sign up for topics and what's not, which is very cool. But now, obviously, when then is less of a thing nowadays, I think they are working on a platform for running a virtual conference. I hope we will be able to see a glimpse of it on Friday, as I hope DevOps will be run on this platform. And then we will see if that actually works. And if it does, maybe this is where we can actually find a working tool for doing that.
And we'll another actually virtual conference that we're running. It's all the talks, and that I can't even remember the date. Honestly, I think it's April 17th. I don't know. I gotta look. But something that Patrick Dubois started. So it's coming sort of from SNCC, but sort of not. And it's more of a community event. And we're gonna donate the proceeds to coronavirus response. But it kind of like we're again trying to pull it off in like a span of a month. So again, another interesting learning it's going to be.
Yeah, and you know what platform will it use? How it will be done technically?
We haven't actually made a decision. I think the conversation right now was streaming on YouTube, and I basically just also pitched the idea of pre-recording the talk so we don't have to worry about it. And also, like, we're doing the 24-hour event, so that's even harder because it's hard just to find speakers in like APAC time zone. Like, it's much easier for Europe and US, but like doing the APAC is usually non-trivial. So
yeah, interesting. So yeah, we'll see how all those events work out in terms of I mean, the speakers, we know them, the content, we know them, everything will be fine. I think the real biggest question now is the technical feasibility of an engaging online conference. I'm still
because it's like we have the platform to do like streaming, right? We can webcast whatever, but it's
can't
hard
simulate to like hanging out at the hotel bar and having like interesting, more natural conversations there with a webinar. Like it's
right.
But I'm also like that.
I am super worried about for folks just mentally disconnecting, because like that's what happened to me in meetings, right? If I'm in a meeting and the content is not super relevant to me, I'm just gonna start multitasking, and like after a while, like that's it. I'm not paying attention anymore. So
I guess those discussions room during the talks is for that. If instead of multitasking and disconnecting and switching to your emails, switch to discuss the topics in the room, and you will still be in the context of the what's going on, but you will be bored just staring into people, on a
just gave me an idea, because like people were talking about like game rooms at conferences, like not game rooms during the breaks, but game rooms that are available all the time. And so maybe like we do something like a virtual game room that's available all the time, not just like during the, but sometimes people don't want to go to a certain session, and it would be cool if we had some content like or some ability to interact that was happening during that time.
Yeah, I went to a conference in January or the first couple weeks of February, Pi Cascades. They had a game room available at all times with board games and a couple of Nintendo Switches. People were playing Smash. Because, sometimes there's just like nothing going on in that time slot that's interesting to you.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have the space to just decompress a little for 45 minutes. So, yeah, that's interesting. You could have a separate Zoom room set up playing like Jackbox games or something. Those will allow interaction with like a couple hundred players, like 4 to 6 actually playing the game, but then there's a whole like voting element to Jackbox games. So,
or like esports,
yeah, just play some Counter-Strike.
Oh my. Maybe Minecraft or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting because like usually in real events, like if I think about DevOps at Chicago, it's just like the hallway track, right? You go talk to sponsors or just talk to other people in the hallway. But in a virtual track, you have to have something intentionally set up for this.
Yeah. It's a hurdle for sure, because I think most people really enjoy the hallway track conferences.
Yeah.
It's,
Well,
Well,
and for us DevRel, I don't know about you all, but I usually notice that DevRel people don't go to most of the talks because they just like there's a level of like how much conferences you can take.
yeah, I don't go to nearly as many sessions as I used to, for sure. Like before I was in DevRel, I could easily spend like all day just straight in sessions, even stuff that was only like vaguely interesting to me or
Yeah.
something I knew almost nothing about. But now definitely I'm pickier about it because you just don't have the like emotional bandwidth, I guess.
But it's interesting because my last event ended up being DevOps Days New York, and I just went there like to do the booth, which usually wouldn't be exciting, but I just wanted to be at the event. And so I went, and then we had enough people to do the booth that I could go to like most of the sessions that I wanted to, and I ended up going to a lot of them, like a lot more than I would typically. And it just like it was such a good event. I was so good, like it was so. I was happy that it was ended up being my last because like there was friends and there was good content and just like community feeling before it all shut down.
yeah,
I
last
missed it.
couple of conferences were definitely very, very weird. Yeah.
Yeah, how was RSA?
So RSA was super,
I
super
skipped that.
strange. Next booth to us was, I think, the worst conferences sponsorship ever. It was a booth that promoted a conference in China in June. And the folks, like security conference, and the folks there were obviously Chinese. And over 5 days of RSA with 50,000 people in the expo, I don't have they had a single visitor there.
Oh my
That's
god.
sad. Because
Yeah.
what, people
That
were just uncomfortable being around
Yeah,
people with
it was
disabilities?
like it was all together, right? It was first of all, obviously people from China sitting there, and that was like what? That was already end of February, I think. It was in the midst of everything in China. It was like all the all the quarantine in Wuhan and everywhere. Like China was on lockdown by then, so that was obviously not Chinese origin people, but actually people from China, because all the booth was half Chinese, half English, and they were promoted a conference in Beijing. So there was obviously Chinese. So no one went to their booth because of that. And also, I mean, it was clear for now that this conference is not going to happen. June in China. Uh, so that was like absolutely surreal, and it was huge booth. It cost like tons of money, obviously, because these large booths in RSA are very expensive, and they were sitting there like 5 folks, and it was like
Sad.
it was very strange. It was
I feel
like you
really
could see the
bad for them. That
crowd
sucks.
just going around them, and no one got in. That was like super weird.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
I feel really bad for them.
Yeah, that was my heart got out for them, because that was really like very, very sad and strange sight to see. That's
I
for
was
sure.
supposed to go to one of the Linux Foundation events whatever a couple weeks ago, and that was one like that I had to cancel like 1 week to the next because like GitHub announced a travel ban for us. And so and that was also like I wonder how that went because like there was a lot of Asia Pacific folks like in the speaker lineup and stuff like that, and so like I'm just I don't know, it was probably a very sad conference.
Yeah, a conference that I was supposed to keynote at got canceled in like the last week of February. It was supposed to be in, oh man, that's depressing. It was supposed to have started today in Budapest. Um, and they just didn't have a choice because too many of the speakers and too many of the employees of the conference work for companies that had just started instituting travel bans. It just was not viable.
And they canceled pretty early, by the way.
They
I
did.
mean,
They
all the
did.
wave of cancellations came much later. That was one of the first that got canceled.
There
They
was a lot
they
of
just had
also in Asia, like FOSS Asia and the DevOps Singapore and stuff like that, that like we still like people still thought we're gonna run even into like March.
DEF CON China got postponed, which is insane. Like if like actual DEF CON, like the main DEF CON is like August 6th in Vegas. And I don't know what's going to happen if DEF CON announced that DEF CON is canceled, because it's like, you know, it's a running joke that DEF CON is canceled. Every year, some rumor is started that DEF CON is canceled, and people who aren't in the know freak out thinking that DEF CON has actually been canceled. So it's like, it's an ongoing joke, but this year it might actually be canceled. And I wonder if people are going to like believe it if it actually happens.
So the very hard part, like, is that some of these conferences completely community driven, and for those, like, they will probably actually go bankrupt. So like, once you can't, like, especially if you already put in a deposit on a venue, like, I mean, there's only so much you can do, right? Because your sponsor is going to pull out, and you know everything. Like, you can't make money on tickets. So like, some of these events, it could be very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, DEF CON has like a several years long contract with the Caesars group of hotels, but DEF CON is, I don't know if DEF CON actually has sponsors. I don't think it does in the traditional sense, but Black Hat does. So we'll see what happens with Black Hat, I guess.
When are they?
DEF CON is August, it starts August 6th or 7th.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm skeptical. I think if they announce that DEF CON is canceled, unless the hotels themselves are actually closed, I think a bunch of people will still just show up. Because that's the other half of the running joke. DEF CON was canceled last year. We just showed up anyway.
But I don't think by August. I mean, it really depends what is going to happen, and no one knows. But if this social distancing and you know, shelter in place thing is going to stick, I don't think people will go to socialize in the hotel by then. I think we will have this discipline of actually staying at home. But
well, and I will also say, like, some of this, like, imagine a multinational events, like some of the borders are closed and airlines are going bankrupt and stuff like that. Like, I mean, this infrastructure can't be easily restored. Like, even if the government goes like in 2 weeks, like, okay, we're back to normal, like it's not going to be that easy to come back from this.
No, it's not. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah, we'll see. On the other side, the whole idea of this quarantine is flattening the curve, and but by the end, but sometime in the future, the second wave of people have to get sick, right? So now it's all the people of essential businesses that will get sick, and hopefully our medical system in the world will be able to kind of deal with that. But once they are all got out of it, the next bunch of people needs to get sick, and so all this quarantine will be lifted, so people get out more, get a little bit sick again, to the level of the health system to be able to deal with them. The whole idea is we're not, in the end of the day, most of us will get sick.
All right, so Baruch, chief virus advocate.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm kind of on the pessimistic side of this too, and it's not because, like, I'm not panicking. I just think that it would do us more good to be prepared for this to be a massive disruption rather than pretend that it will all go back to normal.
Well, it is already a mass disruption. Yeah, so maybe, you know what, your DEF CON people that will just show up will be the next wave.
This virus doesn't quite work that way, but it's not the same. But, you know, our normal lives are disrupted and we can't have in-person conferences, but we're changing the way we do things online, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of it, of like maintaining a sense of community. It's a little bit weird, it's a little bit wobbly, but you know, we're doing what we can with limited resources. And I think it's commendable what we've achieved as a community so far with respect to making virtual events more of a thing. Because they're also more accessible for some people who physically cannot go to an in-person event.
That's for sure. That's for sure. There is
something that was worth looking into.
Yeah, and so like developing this muscle is a cool thing that's going to benefit us all in the long run. And I'm actually also like I agree with you. I'm impressed with how fast things are changing over. Like, you know what I mean? Like I would expect it would take us a couple of months to adapt, but no, like
No,
all events are
immediately.
springing everywhere. Yeah.
Just like a hard pivot on a dime.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's again, like, I don't think there's a replacement for in person. It's just, it's going to be another option that people have now compared to what we did.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. It's not the best way for us to discover that this is a thing we needed and figure out how to do it, but it's good that it happened.
Yeah, and on the optimistic note, once everything's get back to normal, we will have both. We will have our personal events, our in-person events that we love and miss back, but also the virtual thing that we built hopefully won't get away, and we'll have both.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So on this optimistic note, I think that's a good note to end this podcast. Sasha, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and like, thank you for. I think there's lots of good things that are coming out of us being friends. So I'm happy to get to know you more.
Yeah. We will definitely. I love how this podcast is kind of a catalyst for more things to do, and definitely we will try to keep that coming as well with GitHub and JFrog and Azure and everything in between. Obviously, our personal relationship is now elevated to seeing you almost in person, and hopefully soon in person as well. So yeah, this is also, and thank you very much again. This is, as I mentioned, is already recorded live on JFrog YouTube. So the recording will probably now process and will be available in a matter of minutes. I'm going to upload the video to our podcast, so everybody who are following our podcast with their podcast viewers, listeners, and what's not will be there as well. Twitter, Sasha?
Absolutely.
Your Twitter?
Oh, my Twitter. Sure. It's DivineOps, DIVINE. Ops.
Which I think is a genius handle.
Cute. It's very good.
Yeah. Kat?
I was going to go for DevOpsSpeakeasy back in the day, but it was
DevOps.
taken, and I am kind of happy the way it ended up.
Yeah, DevOps is a lot. Who is DevOps, by the way?
I have no idea, but it was taken back in the day when I wanted to get it.
I'm going to check on it.
Which was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's still, it's David Lopez. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, he's from Ecuador. He has 2 followers, and has 1 follower, and he follows 2 people, and he has like 1 tweet.
So, it's interesting because like I have this handle on a lot of platforms, but I'm discovering things that like all the things that have something to do with streaming, I don't have this handle on. And I'm like, damn, there's a dead channel on YouTube that's DivineOps that like hasn't been posted to in 4 years. I'm like, come on, let me have this.
Rough.
Yeah, in Twitch, the username is taken on Twitch. So like there's a bunch of stuff. I'm like, I'm having an identity crisis. I mean, what do I name myself if I can't have this one?
Well, if you want to come at me on Twitter,
Yes.
my Twitter handle is Dixie3Flatline. If you know what that's a reference to, 1 person ever has gotten it, you can DM me with the answer, and I will send you the newest JFrog t-shirt.
There you go.
Which is an Iron Frog.
Yes, which is Iron Frog. And I'm at Baruch on Twitter, but also almost anywhere else. But it's not. It's a little bit better than the DivineOps situation. I do have it on YouTube, but yeah, there are a couple of places that it was taken, but the majority of it is just at Baruch, so that's easy. Again, thank you all for coming, and see you and hear you in future episodes of the DevOps Speakeasy Podcast. And with that, bye-bye.
Bye.